welcome back to the Scarfey Spurs podcast. Hope you've all been keeping well. Thank you very much for joining me. In this episode, we'll be reviewing the transfer window, talking about Johan Lange's interview after the transfer window closed. Who thought it could be so long for so little activity for Spurs? Was the transfer window even open? I don't know. You tell me that. And also, we preview Manchester United in the Premier League as we try and stop Michael Carrick's Manchester United, making it 4 wins in a row. He's also up himself, Michael Carrick, for manager of the month for January, just to give an idea of how they've been performing. Let's introduce the panel there one by one. Joining me is the wonderful Billie T from Change for Tottenham. Billie, how you doing?
Yeah, I'm very good. Thank you, mate. Very good. Very glad to be on this great panel and looking forward to get into it with everyone.
Oh, it's great to have you. Thank you so much. Appreciate you giving me your time. Ian, welcome back on the podcast. You have your own channel, Spurs Diehards, a very good channel. So yeah, please do tell people a little bit as well about that and hope you've been keeping well, Ian.
You've unmuted me just as I unmuted myself. Yeah. First of all, thanks for having me back. Good to be on your show. Interesting to hear the views of Tottenham for Change as well. I've seen what they write, but I've not actually met any of the people behind them. So that's certainly an interesting take, particularly with the Lange interview that I listened to again today in preparation for this show. Yeah, Spurs Diehards is a channel that's co-run by me and Adrian Stroker. We've only been going a year and a half, but it's gone from absolute strength to strength. Won a couple of awards last year for Best New Show and Most Underrated Show. We get some good numbers. We get some very good numbers, and you've been on it before, and we try and pride ourselves on mature, grown-up content rather than some of the hyperbole that one or two of the channels are into. So, yeah, thanks, Harry. Looking forward to the show. Looking forward to talking to your other guests as well.
Great stuff, Ian. Thank you for your time. Mikey, welcome back on. You're a journalism student. Thank you for your time. I know we've done quite a few things together. How are you doing, my friend? Great to have you on the Spurs podcast for the first time after coming on the Premier League podcast the other day.
No, I'm happy to be here, obviously making my debut, and I'm joined by such esteemed guests, especially all of my other fellow Tottenham fans. It's good to be here. I'm looking forward to contributing tonight, hopefully coming on more regularly as the season comes to its conclusion and beyond. And I'm looking forward to hearing what our other guests have to say as well. So it's good to be here.
No, it's good to have you. Let me tell you that, Mikey. Thank you very much. And Dustin as well, becoming a regular, which is fantastic, on Scarfey Spurs podcast. How are you doing? Joining us 3 a.m. in Singapore. Impressive stuff, as always.
Yeah, it's 3 a.m. in Singapore. It's basically the normal time I have to wake up to watch games whenever they are night games in the midweek anyway.
Wow. I don't know either, I'll tell you, especially the way we're playing at the moment. But I hope you didn't stay at that time for the transfer window, because you would have been extremely disappointed as well as tired, I'm sure. Don't want to be doing that. The games is a bit more entertaining. Dustin, thank you very much for coming on. And people who are listening on YouTube live, get involved in the chat. Listen by audio podcast platforms as well. Please do still get involved, even though it's not live. Let's get into it then. I want to talk about the transfer window first. Billie, if I come to you, of course, you're a member of the Change for Tottenham. So first season individual, your thoughts can I get as your thoughts on the window, but also the position of Change for Tottenham, how they view the transfer window and the club moving forward.
Yeah, my own thoughts are that it was very disappointing again. I feel like when the manager is coming out on Friday and saying that the squad is weaker than it was in the beginning of January, that's a huge red flag. And then to not sign anyone on the Sunday or the Saturday was a real disappointment. We're going into that Man City game with 12 outfield players. We're going to be really short. Had 8 injuries in January. So, yeah, really disappointing window. Did some okay things. Obviously, I'm for the signing of Conor Gallagher. Sousa is a good signing for the long-term future as well. But I just feel like it's another transfer window where we've left a manager short. And, particularly coming into it midway through, Vinay had his statement in the program before the West Ham game, saying that they're going to prioritize player trading, as he calls it, and prioritize bring up the wage bill and signing experienced players. We didn't see it in the end, and I think really disappointing overall. And I'm not a fan of Thomas Frank by any means, but I do feel like he's been left short and another in the long list of Tottenham managers that end the transfer window sort of left short. But in this case in particular, I feel like we are weaker than we started January, which is unforgivable. In terms of change for Tottenham, I don't speak after everyone can change Tottenham or anything like that, but I think the fan sentiment that we're getting is echoes the fan sentiment everywhere. Is that it's a big disappointment so far, I think.
I think you'd be right to say that, Billy. Thank you very much. Ian, what were your thoughts for the transfer window? Because there were positives like bringing in Conor Gallagher, but was it not enough for you? Is that the way you view it?
No, I mean, I think there's so much being promised. The Lewis family. I mean, it sounds like the Partridge family. Ask your grandma about them. I think Conor Gallagher is a good signing, but I think the problem for me is that we strengthened an area. We spent our biggest sum on an area that, wasn't the priority for being strengthened. There were other areas of the field. Left back, I know we got Souza, but he's a youngster. He's one for the future. Another striker, and particularly a left-sided attacker that were far more important than signing Conor Gallagher in an area where we've got blossoming Archie Gray, we've got Bentancur, we've got Polinia, etc. Not a bad signing. I like Conor Gallagher. I've always wanted him at the club. I'm delighted. Just it's disappointing that was the only player, first team player we got. You'll come on to it. And I think it's important that we put it in some sort of perspective. And I'd probably calmed down a little bit from after close of play on Monday when I was pretty incandescent that we've been let down once again by ENIC. That Lange made a point, and I think it's an important point, Harry, that only 33 players were signed by Premier League clubs. So that's 1.2 per club, which is not much, which is indicative that January is a hard window to do business in. I'm satisfied that there is truth that we went big for Semenyo, that we offered more money than we offered, the Manchester City offered. But therein lies the problem. There's been two occasions, and I could talk for an hour about this, so I'll try and make one quick point and then let the other guests talk, Harry, is that we went in big for Semenyo, great, but he had an offer from a club that he knows is going to be challenging for the league, the FA Cup, Champions League, etc. We had opportunities in 2019 when we'd had a couple of years of finishing third and second, runners up in the Champions League, and then the end of this season when we're back in the Champions League and we're a European title holders, where we had an opportunity to really attract big players because of what's ahead. It will be far more difficult now to attract the quality we want when we, in all probability, don't have European football, and we are, let's face it now, a mid-league table team. And unless something dramatic happens, we start offering mega money, or again we start signing players with potential rather than the finished item, or we attract an absolute top-class manager that players are crawling, over coals to play for us. I think the next window is going to be very difficult, and we've missed an opportunity again.
It does very much seem like that, Ian. Thank you very much. Dustin, if I come to you, can I get your thoughts on the transfer window? So often you take a really nice, articulate and balanced, view on things, but you were very, vocal on the deadline day stream that we done. You were part of that you were unhappy with the transfer window, given it an incredibly low rating. So, how do you feel now? Do you still feel as disappointed, a few days after?
Yeah, I think I echo kind of what Ian said, which is we had room for improvement. Because if you look at what our existing squad has, and these are all our central midfielders, you can see that there are three areas that we needed improvement in, which is key passes, progressive passes, and forward passes. And we essentially signed Conor Gallagher, who is a good player, but he replicates kind of the attributes of players we already have four others of. So I would say that, this goes into squad building, and the thing about squad building is about building a balanced squad. So I'm glad that we signed Conor Gallagher because he would be the best player of that squad, of that group that we have. But then what does it mean for those players now? Do we have to sell one of them? Do we have to loan someone out? Between Sarr and Bergvall, they're both young players, and arguably we should be looking to build the team around, but that probably means that one of them needs to go out on loan or will have significantly less minutes. The other part of it about not being in the Champions League is that we have less competitions that we're in, meaning that we have less minutes to give around. And that's another big part about squad building, which is whenever you're out of Europe, you need a smaller squad because you don't have enough minutes to give around. And one of the big side effects of that is that we will have a smaller squad. And we saw that when we got Europe with Ange after the season with Conte, where we were out of Europe. We had a much smaller squad, and then when we got Europe, we had so many minutes that we had not a big enough squad to do it, and then our players basically were overplayed, and that's where all the injuries set in. In terms of the window, if you look at where we could have gone, these are players that would have basically filled those gaps in our existing team, and we didn't, we were in talks with Curtis Jones, I think, and there was some talk about Ekliush, but none of that went through. And these were all players that were available, not necessarily that they would have come in the middle of the season, but part of being in the Champions League is if there's a player in there that's not currently playing in the Champions League and therefore not cup tied, that's a big carrot to dangle in front of them, meaning that you can join us now and you can play in the knockout round of the Champions League. If you go after them in the summer, they might be looking at it going, what am I coming for? You've been in the relegation zone 2 seasons in a row, or we don't know how we'll finish yet. But it's not quite as much of a carrot to get players in. And in terms of where players we could have gone for, there are a number of attributes here that we can look at and go, these players, certain names float up to the top a number of times. There's Elliot Anderson, there's Angelo Stiller, there is Barco as well. So you can't say that these players don't exist. Whether they would necessarily work in the league is a different thing altogether. But, I'd have to say that I was very disappointed with how the window went, primarily because it felt like we talked a lot of talk. We talked about a war chest and everything, but we didn't really do anything.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree with that more. Talk, absolutely, but nothing other than that. Dustin, thank you very much. Mikey, in your view, please also give us your thoughts on the transfer window. But Semenya, for example, the fact that we tried to sign in, pay more money, this is all promising stuff. For me, it doesn't show that we're more ambitious though, because you don't land the player. And I get some things won't work for you, but if you're that attractive for a prospect, you're that ambitious, you're still the player, in my view. And the reality is, New Look board or not, it's the same owners. So, making similar decisions, in my view, and across 2 windows, we've missed out on key players such as Semenya and gives what? It doesn't look good, does it? When you're sitting here saying the right things and then you've got boom, it's like that. It's quite damning.
It doesn't look good, to be honest. No, it doesn't. You look at the way them lot down the road, should we say, have conducted business recently. They've assembled a squad that has enough depth in areas that need it and have gone after the right targets in the right positions. Now, whether or not, for example, Victor Gyökeres as a striker works is up for debate, but they've still targeted the right areas, and they have enough of a profile and enough of an upward trajectory to entice the players that they need to compete at the highest level. We aren't doing that, and it's all well and good offering 70 million for Mark Gahey on deadline day last year and then going after Semenya with higher wages, but they both ended up at Pep Guardiola's Manchester City. Even as a diehard Tottenham fan, I can't look at between Spurs and City and go, I'd prefer to join Spurs, because unless you're being guaranteed a starting berth, like Conor Gallagher was, for example, and there's a bit of suspicion that he might have been trying to play his way into the England squad for the World Cup, which is why he's made that move as well. For example, looking for Andy Robertson to get more minutes as well. We're targeting the right kind of players, but it doesn't, Andy Robertson was going to come in. We would have had then 3 left backs. We would have had Sousa already signed by the time the Robertson links came through. Destiny Udogie, who I think is a very underrated player. He's one of my favourites in the club. And then obviously Andy Robertson as well, who's no spring chicken. And then we've signed Conor Gallagher. It feels like we're neglecting the position as Ian said, we're neglecting the positions we need and oversaturating others. You know, we were in desperate need for a centre-back last window, so we signed Kevin Danzo, who's been an amazing signing. I really love Kev, Super Kev. He's a great player. But I feel like we're just not targeting, you know, the right players. I think the forward line needed massive reinforcements. Obviously, Dominic Solanke has come back in and looked a class above, which isn't hard to do with some of our forwards this year. But Richarlison always picks up niggling injuries. Solanke's fitness wasn't an issue at Bournemouth, and he's had recurring injuries at Tottenham. Mohamed Kudus can't be relied to stay fit because he's so attracted to the ball that players will inevitably foul him, and he's more likely to get injured. Same with Xavi Simons. If he goes down injured, we then have no number 10. We have 3 at the club, and if Xavi goes down injured, we have no 10 at the club. It feels like they've revamped the fitness team for, what is it, the 4th time in however many years now, and we're still seeing these injuries. Obviously, freak injuries like Ben Davis, for example, you can't plan for. But I mean, even Ben Davis, then we would have had 4 left backs at the club if we'd signed Andy Robertson as well. It just feels like the squad planning isn't there, despite the promises from the chairman and the football sporting director. And we've lost kind of our only capable operator in Fabio Paratici to Fiorentina now. And the pressure and the responsibility is being given on Lange, who was in Sweden on transfer deadline, or wherever he's from on transfer deadline day. So I feel like I do agree that I'm not Thomas Frank's biggest fan either, but he has been hung out to dry by the ownership, as so many managers have before him. And it just, new face, you know, it's the old saying, new expletive, same toilet. It doesn't feel like the faces have changed, but the actions haven't. And it's not good enough, really, at the moment.
Harry, can I come in here? Has anybody else heard this? That I think he's Danish, Lange, but notwithstanding that he wasn't in England on deadline day. I've not heard that before. I find that astonishing.
I haven't heard it, but it doesn't surprise me. It doesn't surprise me at all. It's about Levy, a guy that was in the US, you know, in his last transfer window. So for me, it's hardly surprising. But
I'll say allegedly on that. I'll say allegedly. I saw, again, Twitter is not the most reliable source, but a couple of ITKs were saying it. So I'll say allegedly, and I should use that word more often.
I didn't know if it was a bit of your journalism little insight there, but I wanted to know if it's from you or not. But Mikey, thank you very much for that. And that does lead us on to Johan Lange. But just briefly, the way I would sum it up, and please say panel and viewers if you disagree with me, I view it as Thomas Frank's been asked to build a mansion and he's been given inadequate tools that is not up to standards that other competitors have. That's the way I view it. But he's not doing well enough with those tools. He's dropping them on his feet. He's failing to use them. He's holding it upside down, whatever way you want to put it. Right. So he's doing a bad job with the bad tools he's been given. But also those bad tools are just 10 times worse than any competitor you want to try and beat. That's the personal way that I view it. In other words, everyone is accountable, but the problems are deeper than the manager. But Johan Lange was mentioned there. Let's move on then to his interview. So what, Mikey, I'll come back to you because you're the guy that mentioned him there. And there's a lot of things that we can unpick really from his interview. I'm going to pick out a quote, if you don't mind, for you to discuss. And one of the quotes was about next summer. He said that we'll go into next summer with big ambitions. The plans are ready, drawn up, and we have a clear picture of what positions and what profiles we need. Was this carbon copy of what was said for this January window? What happened to that?
Well, it doesn't scream it, does it? I mean, it feels like if you've crashed a car and you're standing beside the wreck saying everything's fine. It doesn't incite confidence, and he doesn't incite confidence really, but
not when you just said that and didn't deliver in January. You say the same thing and no evidence for it, and then you say it again.
I mean, yeah, he makes a good point. January is a harder window to do business in because obviously you want to keep your best players. You saw with Palace losing Gahey and Glazer leaving at the end, and Mateta very nearly left as well. They've kind of it's very rare that happens when a club gets picked apart. So we wanted someone like Semenyo and someone like Gahey and all that stuff, but it screams kind of like we thought we were prepared, then we realized actually we're not as attractive of a proposition as some people make us out to be. So we started to panic and ultimately not done anything because of X, Y, and Z behind the scenes and also in broad daylight as well. So they say they have a strategy for the summer. The strategy for the summer is, I fear we're going to be drawn into a situation where someone is going to have a breakout World Cup and we're going to be queuing up for them because obviously there's always a breakout star that's signed after a World Cup, but there might not be kind of a consistent level of ability shown, and we might end up with another dud signing, because not all of our signings in recent windows have been a success, hardly been a success. I think someone talked about 2019 when we were all into Paulo Dybala and we weren't willing to stump up however much it was for his image rights, and then we ended up going to get Giovanni Lo Celso instead. Who, again, I loved Lo Celso when he was here, but he wasn't Paulo Dybala, let's put it that way. So I think it does show that it's a recurring pattern. It's not a one-time thing. It's not, we just had a bad window. It's like, well, we've had such good windows before. We keep having continually non-adequate windows because our squad is in a state where we might solve problems, but throughout the season, several more will develop, and then we solve half of them, but then more problems that we're stuck in a feedback loop with injuries and everything. And I know it's almost impossible to rely purely on signings to change the rot that's set in at this club, but on the pitch, success goes a long way to doing that. And we thought we were going to build on that following Bilbao, and we've regressed. I think I saw someone on Twitter say that they haven't seen a club go backwards after winning a trophy since Crystal Palace this season, and it feels like we're in the same boat in that we should have kicked on. It should have been a turning point for us, and it on our way back to where we want to be and where we know we should be, and it just hasn't.
And I think I'll add to that is that, in that same season where we were supposed to sign Dybala, we ended up with Lo Celso. The other player that was also an option for us in that season was Bruno Fernandes, right? And it's always like this. We always end up with there's the season that we could have got Shevchenko and we went for Pavlyuchenko, right? We always go for the cheaper option that ends up not really working out for us.
Absolutely, and that's the thing. Depending on which way you look at it, right? And it's also got to try and understand both, right? January is a really tough window. We all know that in terms of you've got limited time, but also clubs are, as Panel said, unwilling to let players go, understandably, unless they can find a replacement. That's why deadline day is so tough, and often why things are left so late because it takes so long to get done. And it is tough in that aspect, and very few deals, not a lot going on deadline day, not a lot going across the January window. Ian rightly mentioned there, on average, just over one signing per club this window, so nothing extraordinary. The Tottenham just signed one. But also, you can get business done if you show ambition. City signed Semenya and Guehi in January. That's two big names. And of course, neither Bournemouth or Palace would have liked that. But in reality, they realise that's what's best. City got the money, they pay, and they accept, no doubt about it. Palace would have wanted to keep Guehi to the end of the year. But sometimes money does talk, and Tottenham need to learn a lesson from that, I say. But let's continue then with Johan Lange's interview. Billie, if I come to you, Lange was asked about injuries, and he said it's important as a club to remain disciplined and make signings only to help for the short or medium term, not the long term. Billie, do you make him right in this case, or can you understand where he's coming from?
I can understand where he's coming from, but the problem is with that outlook is a lot of our injuries are long term, and we've been plagued by injuries all season, including over a 2-3 year period now, and we're probably likely to pick up more injuries as well. And I understand the line of thinking that you only want to bring in players that are good for the long term, but if you sign the right players, they're good for the short term and the long term. So I think it's just a weak excuse, to be honest. I think, and it's interesting, they're happy to mention, if you average it out or whatever, 33 signings made in January. Well, none of those other 37, none of those other 19 Premier League clubs have got 12 first-team players injured. So, you can just use the stats to sort of to back up your feeling, as Lange tried to do, but it doesn't really wash, because we are going through an unprecedented injury crisis off the back of last season with an unprecedented injury crisis. So it's not a level playing field for all Premier League teams. And I think at the end of the day, we're weaker than we were in January, and that's at the beginning of January. That's just completely unacceptable. And so trying to average it out with leveling the playing field with look at what all the other clubs are doing, it doesn't really work, because our injury problems have turned into a crisis, and it's been a crisis for a long time. And the fact that we have to bring on 17-year-old Byfield, who looks a really good prospect, but in his first game he came out right back. Then in the last game he's coming on for a striker. So and playing centre back, we're really, really short on numbers. So I don't think that excuse washes at all, to be honest.
Okay, thank you, Billie, for that. Appreciate it. Ian, if I come to you, there was another quote from Johan Lange. This one was on investment. And he said, even though our financial situation is better than most clubs and we have owners that are willing to invest, it's important to sign the right players. The lack of incomings wasn't a lack of willingness to make investment to support the team. I mean, of course, he'd be told what to say, similar lines there, but the messaging is clear. Do you agree with that? You agree with what you're saying? You are on mute. Just unmute yourself in and we'll be able to hear.
Yeah, I've done it. Sorry about that. I sort of agree and I sort of don't. And let me just elaborate on that and pick up particularly what Billie was saying. If you ever remember those old Tom and Jerry cartoons or something with, there's the pipe and there's constant leaks, and you go a leak there, and then you put your cup there, and then there's another leak, so you put your leg there, and then another leak, and then you fill them up, and then there's another leak, and you've got nowhere to go, and the cat falls off the cat falls off the pipe. It's a little bit like that. If you're constantly trying to fill gaps when you've got an injury and are playing catch up, you will end up with a totally imbalanced squad. So you'll end up with 6 right wingers because you've lost Johnson, Kudus is injured, etc. And I absolutely right that you cannot change your strategy, but for short term gain, because that money's gone. However, there were players we were linked with. Someone, Akanouche, that we were trying to get. And I mean, I read Monaco had been expecting a bid all window, and it was getting late if they wanted a replacement and what have you. Now, it doesn't seem like we made a bid. Now, I've read from a number of sources, including the so-called ITKs, that he was a player we very much wanted, and yet we didn't make an offer for. And I don't really.
And the replacement came in because they got Adingra, right? Who would ostensibly have been his replacement.
100%. And I also read on deadline day that because he's was at Sunderland, that the medical was done at Tottenham. And you're starting to think, it's being done at Tottenham because there's some reciprocity here, and we're doing them a favour. We're getting Akanouche, and away we go. And I think in the end we'd have been relatively happy with that. Two quality signings, particularly one that can play across the front line. But in the end, there doesn't appear to have been any proper offers. I mean, Yildiz was another one we apparently wanted. And nothing happened. Again, it's not as if, we made an offer, he rejected us or what. I don't know. And you're left with that feeling, despite the fact that you mustn't panic buy. And as I think what Lange was alluding to, you can't panic buy. At the end of the day, there must have been opportunities because we were linked with so many players, and it doesn't appear we made any concrete offers for any of them. And that's what's disappointed me most of all.
I agree with that. I think you're spot on to say that, Ian. Thank you very much. Dustin, before we move on, what do you make of Johan Lange there? Of course, the club customary interview after the game. He spent 8 minutes talking about Conor Gallagher, hyping it up. What did you make of overall what he had to say?
If I had to summarize the transfer window in one word, it would be pathetic. And I think one of the other things that Ian mentioned, we're helping Sunderland with the medicals, just so that we can get Akliush over the line. And in the end, we help someone else out and we don't get it over the line. And then Paratici is helping out Fiorentina while he's supposed to be doing a window for us. I've searched Paratici's name just to confirm this, and then I've just seen he's dropped an interview saying he's not sure Tottenham's training centre is better than Fiorentina's, who are in the relegation zone. Although so are we, more or less. But yeah, I think that it's a damning indictment that we haven't got anything over the line, that our revolutionary dual director structure didn't last any longer than Liz Truss letters, and one of our 2 directors has left, and they are now saying that we will replace that director. So is that an admission that Lange is not up to the job of being the sole director of the club? And if he is, why did we, Paratici was apparently working the window, but he seemed to be working the window for Fiorentina. And as much as we talk about Don Paratici and how he helped sign Kulusevski and Bentancur, I think a lot of people are looking back at that signing going, was Bentancur that great at signing? And what Paratici seems to specialize in, other than getting lots of irons in the fire during transfer window and being on his wired headset, is helping plunder his previous club for his new club. He did it for us when he left Juventus, and now he's doing it for Fiorentina in the midst of leaving us. So it just seems like a complete mess overall, and it also speaks to how much Lange's specialty is, more based on youth signings, because our signings, other than Gallagher, which was an obvious, good value signing, homegrown and all of that, but all the other signings have been very much youth based, and I don't know what we were expecting if we had Lange as the youth oriented football director, and then we don't have the senior team football director doing his job.
Absolutely. I find it hard to disagree. I think you said there. Thank you, Dustin, for that. And Matt Law said just yesterday that Tottenham begin the search for Fabio Paratici replacements. They plan to stick to the model of 2 sporting directors for anyone that missed that. So the model stays the same. The face will be different, though. Before we move on to Manchester United, and we should be, if things go to plan, joined by a Manchester United fan and YouTuber. I want to discuss Christian Romero's comments because he has released another statement. I have briefly already spoken about this on the podcast, but it is, of course, a big statement, and Frank's spoken about it since. So reminder for people who didn't see what Romero said. When I say statement, it's just a usual customary post on Instagram post-match, but a little bit different in the wording. So he said, great effort from all my teammates yesterday. They were incredible. Here's the interesting bit. I wanted to be available to help them, even though I wasn't feeling well, especially since we only had 11 players available. Unbelievable, but true and disgraceful, and goes on to thank the fans. Billie, I come to you. This is definitely not the first. It definitely will not be the last that Christian Romero has spoken about. We know who this is aimed at, right? This is aimed at the board. He's aimed at the hierarchy. It's at Enoch, Lewis family, whatever way you want to paint it. But he's saying the same. Is Romero just saying what all our fans are thinking and what the dressing room's thinking? He's just a spokesperson for it. They'll probably take the fine, take the punishment behind the scenes sometimes. We know about it publicly as well. I think he's just, he's voicing a lot of our concerns.
Yeah, definitely. And I know, you can question whether it's good for a captain to be coming out and talking like that or not. And but I think what you have to remember as well is that the second point that you made there is that a lot of the players liked that post and stuff. So I think he's not just speaking for himself. He's speaking on behalf of lots of lots of the playing staff as well. And yeah. I think it just echoes fan sentiment, to be honest with you. And I know Thomas Frank has come out today and said they've dealt with it internally and he wouldn't have done it. But, I think he's just speaking up for the incompetence that we're seeing. Christian Romero is a proven winner. He wants to win. He's passionate. I know he has his, problems on the pitch, which, people criticize. But this is a guy that's won a World Cup. He's won multiple international trophies. He was Europa League Player of the Season when we won that tournament. He's a winner. And he wants to be a member of an ambitious football club. And we haven't been delivered a football club, so he's rightly speaking out about it, I think.
Okay, Billie, thank you very much. Can I stick with you, though? Because, like Frank says there, that he wouldn't have done it. But he was respectful in what he said, Frank, but in the end, you're right, he added that bit, I wouldn't have done it. But a lot of people look at that and go, he wouldn't, because, ultimately, you're a yes man and you're a puppet. I like Thomas Frank, but that's what a lot of people would say. Because he hasn't called out, for example, the lack of January input. I suppose he can't in his position. But Frank, for me, is playing the game of let's keep upstairs happy and I'll remain in the job rather than keeping the fans happy. And that will work and keeping him in the job, but it won't win the supporters back.
Yeah, and I think Frank is talking from the position of a man whose job is almost on the line game by game at the moment. So he's hardly going to come out and criticise the owners. I think, if you are going to go down the Conte route or something like that, then that's just not Frank's personality. He's quite a measured guy, and he's in the position that he's in where he could lose his job in any game. He's hardly going to come out and do it. So, yeah, I don't agree with his position, but I understand it.
Makes sense. That actually makes a lot of sense. Billie, thank you very much. Can I come back to you, Mikey? I want to get your thoughts on what Christian Romero had to say. I know that we briefly spoke about it the other day, but yeah, as captain very rare do you see any player like the captain, go and speak and be as vocal as that. And this is not a one-off, which tells me it's not a coincidence. I don't think it's even Romero, boom, responding. I think he's a passionate player, an aggressive player. We see that. I don't think this is just passion. I think this is genuine belief. If you sat down with him now, on the sofa, he was calm. I think he'd say exactly the same thing to you, probably in a different way. The point is, this is how he feels. And I know that he gets on, and I know he's speaking. You can tell for the dressing room. So do you think finally that, after saying it 4 or 5 times now, that upstairs will at least take some note? It doesn't feel like it. It feels like Romero is the one who's punished. But really, they should be listening to what he's saying, right?
Well, yeah, I think if he would say it in a different way, he'd say it in Spanish. But I also think it would be really hard for us to. It's really hard for us to sympathise with his position, because obviously we're not a multi-million-pound earning footballer player who's a captain of a supposedly Big Six Premier League team. But in that same vein, he is definitely speaking what 95% of the fan base is thinking, watching every game. Match-going fans who are spending their hard-earned money week in, week out, going to watch their football. Excuse me. Going to watch their football team as a form of escapism. At least that's what I do. My week is quite crammed at the moment, and that 2 hours at the weekend or in the midweek when Tottenham play, until recently, was giving me some respite from that, and now it only fuels my misery. And watching Cuti Romero come out and say something like that is a damning indictment of where the club is, because it feels like it's at war with itself. It doesn't know what it wants to be, and that's not a particularly conducive environment, especially for a club that wants to attract the best players. If you're Mark Gahey, or if you're, and more pertinently, Antoine Semenyo, you see the club captain, the player who you're going to be reporting to on the pitch, criticizing the people who are going to make your transfer happen. What does that say? Does that screams of a club that's kind of at war with itself and doesn't know its own identity? It doesn't show confidence. It doesn't show that Romero believes that the club is in a good position. He knows, and he sees it because he's friends with these people. He knows how bad the situation is when you're asking the same 12 players to play 90 minutes of football every 4 days for months on end because you've constantly got a rotating cycle of injuries. They're going to be exhausted. They're going to not be able to put in their best performances. And yes, we do have a week's break before the Champions League knockout stages begin. But once those knockout stages begin, and if we are somehow lucky enough to make it through to the quarters or the semis, these players are going to have a 2-week break and then go off to the World Cup, and they're not going to have a break in their schedule until summer 2027, which is only going to fuel more injuries. And then there's more games that are going to be being played. And Romero knows that we need reinforcements. He knows, as a player, member of FIFA Pro, whatever, he knows how bad the fixture congestion is, and we're just not addressing it. And he is the mouthpiece. He's the captain. It's no surprise that he's the one who, he leaves it all on the pitch. He plays for the badge. He leaves his heart on his sleeve. But he's also given the board a piece of his mind. And he signed a new contract and was happy to stay at the club and all that. And ever since then, it's just been kind of pound after pound after pound from Romero butting heads with the executives. So something has to give. And I would be really shocked if it isn't Cuti Romero at some point in the coming future.
I agree with you, but Mikey, do you think he's been promised something that hasn't been delivered? Because the way he speaks, I just think he was told, we will do this, right? Maybe I don't think it necessarily being about an individual, maybe we sign or something we'd necessarily achieve. I just think it was like, look, we will sign this profile of player, we will do this, you'll see so much change by this certain date. I just think whatever they promised, they clearly haven't delivered. Oh, have we lost you, Mikey? Oh, I think we've lost you for a second. Don't worry. We'll come back to you when you do return. Instead, Ian, I'll give you that question.
Yeah.
Do you think Romero promised something that couldn't be delivered?
Mikey's come back. Mikey, I don't know. Do you want to speak, Mikey? You did freeze for a minute.
Yeah, I know my Wi-Fi drops out sometimes, and I think I missed half the question. So, Ian, you take it. Don't worry.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely fine. Because what I was going to say was, I really find it difficult to add much to what Mikey and Billie have already said. I think they've nailed this, and I don't want to just repeat what they've said. I don't think there's much that can be added. I think that whether Romero, like Conte, is trying to work his ticket, I don't know. Well, he Levy's leaving in the summer. We'll see about that. We've heard he wants to leave. There's talk Vuskovic won't come because, well, he's too big for Tottenham already at 18. That Mickey wants to go, and that Liverpool still have a space on that left side of their defence because let's face it, Van Dijk isn't getting any younger and any better, and all of those are worrying signs, whether they take place or not. But I mean, there's Ari K2E. There must be. I bet there's something a better way of pronouncing that. Ultimately, the mess still around even after Levy gone. The club has outgrown these owners. I think yes and or no, and it goes back to what Phil says as well about the Paul Mitchell train. But what worries me is that when Levy left, there was a leadership vacuum that hasn't been filled, and it's not capable of being filled by Vinay, who I think is very much a number 2 or number 3, or by Lange, who's not director of football material. And I'm very much on the Paul Mitchell bandwagon. I think he's a highly successful, highly capable operator who is more than up to being our director of football. And I think that he would love to come back. I think for him, like Maurizio, is unfinished business. You know, I had my dream job, and Daniel Levy turned it into a nightmare because of Daniel's constant hands-on micromanagement of people rather than letting the professionals get on with it. I would also, if you're talking about bringing back people who have unfulfilled ambitions at Tottenham, would see whether we could get Paul Barber back from Brighton. He's CEO, deputy chairman at Brighton. We could offer him the same job, probably much more responsibility, presumably a far higher salary as well, with a far higher ceiling. And maybe the two of them, who worked brilliantly together in that golden era that we had between 2016 and 2019, we didn't realise just how good that was, could come back and finish the business unencumbered by Daniel Levy. But at the moment, I see a complete lack of leadership at the very highest levels, and there is not a business that will ever succeed without the very best people at the very top. And that's why we've got into the situation we are now.
Absolutely, well said. I think you speak the mind of many fans, myself included. Thank you, Ian, for that. Matt Law said for the Daily Telegraph of the week that at the after party of Tottenham's Europa League victory, Chris Romero is said to have opened each bottle of champagne one after one and shouted the words to the effect of "This is on the president." He's referenced to former chairman Daniel Levy. That made me chuckle when I saw that. I thought it was one of those fake accounts. I had to double check. No, it wasn't. It was true. But Dustin, there is something serious that I do want to ask you about, because the top Argentinian source, Gaston Nadal, who's got, by the way, when I say credible, people often like to shut this down because it's not what they want to hear, but he's got 1.1 million followers on X. Everything he usually says about any Argentinian player over here in England in the Premier League, often, and also with the Argentinian national team, tends to be absolutely spot on, or very close of the mark. So can I ask you about what he said, that Cuti Romero is going to leave Tottenham in the next market in June and has interest from La Liga and another league? And when he was asked about this again this morning, he backed up what he said. And he said it's not a matter of he wants to, he's going to. So he's very strong in what he's saying. Is this concerning?
It is concerning, and I don't see any reason why we should be surprised. If you look at the scale of it, like, he is essentially going to be Argentina's next captain. He is in a dressing room with everyone else he's won a World Cup with, and his team is going to be in the relegation zone for 2 seasons in a row. How as a captain of a World Cup winning team, are you going to look at your teammates from Chelsea and all these other teams and going, yes, I'm sticking with this club that won't sign players? That there's an element of personal pride there, and there's also I think one of the reasons that he spoke out on Instagram, him posting on Instagram posts in a way that would make Gary Neville go ooh, but essentially he's aware that a lot of the teammates that he's playing with are also going to go to the World Cup, and us not refreshing the squad, not having rotation options, means that every single international player runs the risk of getting injured and missing out on the World Cup. And I think that's a big part of the reason that he's spoken up, and there are all of these players that are liking and showing their support for him. Because at this point, it looks like Danso is out for the World Cup. We know Poro's injured. We have a
Yes.
whole bunch of like injuries that we don't know whether they'll be long-term injuries that go all the way into the World Cup. And you miss a World Cup, it's like 4 years before you get to play in it again. So he signed a new contract after we got rid of Ange, and he's always worn his heart on his sleeve. You know, after winning Europa League, he's like, this is the way, this is how we go forward. And then we sack the coach that gets us there, and all of those things. So you can say what you want about whether he should be speaking up against the hierarchy in this way, but when it comes down to it, you can't say he doesn't care. And ultimately, isn't that all we ask for? We just ask for players. Like a lot of us, we look at players and coaches go, they're doing it for the money, they don't care. When a player comes out and shows that he cares, you can criticize, you know, the forum of it or maybe the way he does it. But that's actually one of the rarest things to find. Someone that puts his personal reputation, his personal working conditions at risk in order to do something that is aligned with what the fans actually want.
100%. No, well said, Dustin. I agree with that. Thank you all for your comments there on different things, around Couto Romero, particularly his comments on his future. Now we move on to the Manchester United preview, and I'm delighted to be joined by Rich, known as Red Devil United on social media. Fantastic content creator with nearly 7,000 followers on X and over 10,000 YouTube subscribers. How are you doing, Rich? Thank you for your time.
I'm good. Thanks to invite Harry. I know we tried to do this before in the last game, but yeah, no, thanks. Also, I don't know anyone on the panel. I'm assuming most people are Spurs fans, which that's fine.
They all are. Yes, indeed.
Quite a number then. I thought it might be like 3-3, but no, that's absolutely fine.
No, we're hoping this is going to be the score this weekend, and Spurs can score many goals as members of the panel.
Hopefully not.
No,
We can't defend, but we can score.
Absolutely. Well, the way you're going, it might be all right. But for people who haven't seen, give us your rundown on Michael Carrick so far. Because it is 3 wins in a row. But what have you made in that? Because, of course, results are most important. But how have you played? And do you think this is sustainable? Because I saw that Carrick is up for Manager Month, rightly so as well, in January.
Yeah, I think, for a Manchester United fan, you're probably more involved. And the Ruben Amorim situation was pretty bad. I think for me, if you've watched, I don't know how much you watched of Manchester United, I think it's very sustainable because the tactics are lots more simple. It's just a lot of basic stuff which we weren't doing properly. More organisation, just sensible team shape. And if you watch us play, there's a very good team structure. We don't have all the gaps in midfield. The attack looks like it's a lot more joined up, more cohesive. We're creating more chances. It just looks. If you're a Manchester United fan like I've been for decades, last year was probably the worst we've ever watched in terms of results were bad, but the quality of the football was dreadful, like really dreadful. And I think we've lost to you like about 4 times last season. And to be honest, we had a tactically inept manager, and before that we had Erik ten Hag, where I think the 3-0 defeat against you guys was probably one of the worst performances I've ever seen. And I think it's sustainable because we played very difficult games. But normally teams go to Arsenal, score 3 goals. And the difference between Michael Carrick and Ruben Amorim is we used to fade really badly last 20 minutes because the team shape was poor. We relied heavily on athleticism rather than any sort of tactical ability. And now you see Michael Carrick, we played from like the first minute to the 90th minute. It's the best I've seen us play since probably Solskjaer era in terms of football. I know it's only 3 games, but we've been starved of anything. Ruben Amorim took 47 games to get 3 wins in a row. Carrick's taken 3. It's night and day, honestly. I know the results are quite close games, but if you watch the whole matches, it is night and day for Man United fans.
And it's against good opposition as well.
Exactly.
Yeah, you know what I thought? When we had Ruben Amorim was under pressure in like September, October, November, and then when they sacked him, I looked at the fixture list and I was thinking, this is like the worst time for someone to come in. Your first game's against City, okay, at home. Then your next game's away to Arsenal. I think Fulham were actually a bit of an underrated team, quite good. And then you got Spurs, like from like last season. I was just thinking, this is like a really bad run of games. And no, the response has been pretty good. I think Carrick took over like 3 days before City, and Ruben Amorim sort of fans, which there's quite a lot of still. We're saying that Ruben Amorim needed like 10 players. He needed a pre-season. Michael Carrick had 3 days, and we're seeing like a completely different, like a much better quality of football. So I'm quite happy at the moment. I mean, we got terrible owners. I think I probably caught a bit of you talking about some of your ownership problems, but I think up there in terms of owners, we're probably about as bad as you can get.
Absolutely.
Be up to Haz as well. I do know Haz.
Yes, absolutely. Good Tottenham content creator as well. But no, you're right to raise. Yeah, both owners, I think, are problematic. Of course, the Glazers will know a lot of coverage on how bad they are, and rightly so. But before we move, to this game, I just want to say Michael Carrick, what's really impressed me as well since he's come in is that never die attitude. And you briefly mentioned it there, like Fulham pick it back to 2-2. I think the Ruben Amorim side maybe draw it, but more than likely going to lose the game, if I'm honest, whereas you fight back and, win the game. And I just think that's been really impressive. So have you been impressed with that never die attitude and always attacking till the end as well? That's the thing. You faced Arsenal, they pull it back, momentum's with them. No, you keep going. Same with Fulham, momentum's with them. You keep going. You're doing the brave thing and have been rewarded for it so far.
Yeah, I was going to say just a little point as well is there was a couple of games earlier in the season where, I mean, you probably didn't watch them because it's not exciting games, but Manchester United versus West Ham, we were winning 1-0. We make defensive substitutions under Ruben Amorim, invite pressure on ourselves. West Ham peg it back to 1-1. We invite more pressure by making more defensive substitutions. Against Everton with 10 men, we played 5 at the back and we made defensive substitutions. And I think against Arsenal, the difference is, I think trying to think who actually got substituted. I think we had to substitute Dorky because he got injured, and we make an attacking substitution. We had to again do a bit of substitutions in other matches. We've gone more attacking, and it's the sort of thing we used to do, say decades ago. We'd go for it. Like a draw for us at the moment, we're playing to win games, which is what all fans, like Manchester United fans, want to see. That if you're trying to win the game and you're trying to play entertaining football, like attacking football, fans will back the manager. And Ruben Amorim is probably the first manager where I'm not one of these YouTube channels that's going to campaign against the manager all the time. But Ruben Amorim, I saw no light at the end of the tunnel. It was just really bad. I was talking to my dad, who's watched United since the 50s, and he was saying, "You guys should sack Amorim. We should sack Amorim last Easter." Like he'd seen enough of it. And to be honest, I think most fans are just happy it's over.
Absolutely, of course. He seemed very happy as well,
I'll
didn't
ask
he?
a question to you guys because you're in a sort of similar situation to we've been. You got Thomas Frank after what was a disappointing league season for you guys last year. We were done like 15th, 16th with you guys, and you got the Champions League football. You invested like a decent amount. You got some good quality players in. Thomas Frank, I do watch like you guys mostly on Match Today. I don't watch full games a lot of the time. And a lot of it just seems to be like lapsing in concentration where you play actually quite well for a lot of the game. And then I think Van der Ven got done a couple of weeks ago. And it's just like seems like lapses. I don't know whether in the whole match it's that bad, but Thomas Frank seems to be under massive pressure a lot. Are you guys is it more time for Frank, or do you guys think it's not working out, or is it too soon to draw that sort of conclusion?
Wrong man at the wrong time for the wrong job. Maybe a bit like Amorim, but my view is, I suspect from what Billie said earlier, he probably agrees with me that this job was just too big for Thomas Frank. Also, Manchester United, like Tottenham, and you have a rich, illustrious history, is that there is a certain way of playing. If you're a Manchester United manager, you play with flair, you play with ambition. Your dad will be a bit older than me, but when I was brought up watching Law and Best and Charlton, proper footballers with playing the game the right way. We had Billie Nicholson playing the game the right way. My co-host, he's been on the chat, Adrian, Spurs Diehards, talks about having a manager with Tottenham's DNA in their veins, and Thomas Frank doesn't have it. And the stuff that's come out of our dressing room conundrum is that the players are sick of being told how to stop the opposition when they think they're good players and want to go out and beat the opposition. And that, I think, has been part of the problem for us. Yeah, we've had injuries and what have you. But, you know, with the rationale for sacking Ange Postecoglou was that we wanted a manager that could compete on all fronts. So we sack a manager that's competed on all fronts in Japan, in Australia, and in Scotland. His last year in Scotland, he was there 2 years. He won 5 out of 6 domestic trophies. So he knows how to compete. And if you give him the resource, he could put his methods into a Tottenham side. And you replace him with a manager who's never competed for any trophy at any club on any level. And we suddenly find ourselves in 14th. We won't go down this year, thankfully, because there are teams worse than us, and Crystal Palace are probably on a bigger downward trajectory than us. But for us, having won that Europa League last year in Bilbao, to have gone as backwards and, you know, as regressed as we have is an absolute and utter disgrace. And we talked about this with our ownership earlier before you came on. I'm barring a miracle and Frank getting us up into 8th in European football or 7th in European football, or for somehow, you know, doing a fluking of the Champions League like we nearly did in 2019. I'm not. He's the wrong manager at the wrong time. I'd rather have Michael Carrick. I'll tell you, he would know what it's like to be a Spurs manager. If he's not your permanent manager, there's been some names, big names bandied about for your job. We could do worse than look at Michael Carrick as a permanent manager, ex-player, proper footballer. Seems to have sorted you guys out quickly.
Intelligent guy, I think. I think also he got. Yeah. I think he acknowledged that he needed a good team around him. So he's got Holland from the England setup. Yeah. He's got a couple of other people as well. And that was one of the things where I think Ruben Amorim, a bit too arrogant. He brought quite naive, inexperienced coaches, wouldn't take advice. And I think he didn't really get what the job entailed. I think it was just it was levels too big for him. I think the expectation, the pressure. I think Michael Carrick looks relaxed. That's the most thing I can say. He looks calm, relaxed, and like he knows what he's doing, which it seems basic, doesn't it? But we didn't have that for years.
Richie's grown into the job very quickly. That's what I'm impressed about Michael Carrick. He really looked, and that's important for any. I talked about leadership before. For any leader in a business, is, you know, you got to talk the part. But you got to look the part, and he very much looks the part as a Manchester United manager, and he's done a fabulous job for you in a short period of time.
Well, I thought the thing about Ruben Amorim, not to talk about him too much because I've moved on, but very, very quickly, he alienated a few players. He said a lot of things in press conferences which were calling Manchester United saying it's the worst team they've ever had. I think personally insulting players, saying they don't understand his tactics, these sort of things, which it's if it's said behind closed doors, absolutely fine. But I think he didn't carry himself in a professional manner. And for me, it's not what you needed. I'm surprised he lasted as long as he did, to be honest.
I'll let others talk.
No worries. Thank you both there. Nice backs and forwards. But onto this game in particular, Billie, I know you have to jump, so give us your quick thoughts and score prediction. Big game for both.
A tricky game for sure. You know, Man United, I watched all their games under Carrick, and they're really, really good. Really good football that game. You know, the win against Arsenal in particular was massively impressive. So I'm not massively confident ahead of this game at all. I think it'll be really, really difficult. I think the only thing which might favour us is it's an early kickoff, and when you're going to an away ground, an early kickoff is maybe a bit better because it hasn't got a chance to build up the atmosphere. But you know, we have a pretty good record against Man United lately. But I just think the way that we haven't won a game in 2026 in the Premier League, so I personally think to go and expecting a win would be crazy. I never like to predict a loss, so I'm going to go a 2-2 draw. But deep down, I think it's going to be a really difficult game for us, and it'll be, you know, could get ugly, to be honest, if we're not careful. I'm going to go 2-2 on the positive side.
Lovely. We love that, Billie, that positivity.
Which I would take all day long. I would love it to be. I'd love it.
I was going to say, take a draw. Good stuff. Billie, thank you so much for your time. Great to have you. Have a good evening.
And let's hope we do on the weekend.
Fingers crossed. Thank you very much to Billie. The show will go on. We'll wrap up with some thoughts and score predictions. Ian, give us your thoughts and your score prediction on this game. if you unmute yourself, if you don't mind. I want to hear what you have to say.
Yeah. I agree. I've agreed with a lot of things Billy said tonight. I've not been on stream with him before, but hopefully will again. I can't predict a defeat either. And you start to say Carrick's due a defeat, or at least a draw. We tend to concede too many goals, but we've had a little time, a week to recover. So I'm going to go as well. I'm going to stick with 2-2, and I'll bite your hand off for 2-2 now.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate that. Dustin, if I come to you, your thoughts on score prediction?
I don't really see us necessarily getting something out of this game, primarily because we've lost the main attacking pattern of play that Thomas Frank has, which is crosses from Porro or Kudus, both of which are now injured. And then we've also switched to a 3 centre-back pairing in the last few games as a pivot away from that style of play, but now we have done so, that's out. So it almost feels like we, through injuries, have lost our main pattern of play, came up with a different one that we used against Frankfurt, which worked quite well, but then again, we don't know whether teams in Europe are just so unable to deal with English team intensity, whether that actually works against teams in the league. And then now one of the main centre-backs we would have had doing that is also out. So it's really hard for me to see how he pivots out of this. That said, we did hire him for his adaptability, so maybe he comes up with something, but it almost feels like the only player we have that can actually pivot into these, multiple roles is Archie Gray. And I don't know how much we can push him before he gets injured. Spence played as centre-back before, but now he's injured as well. So it's really down to the bare bones. I suspect at some point we will see Byfield get a lot of minutes just due to the amount of injuries that we have going on at the moment. So I think that it will be a loss, maybe 3-1.
Okay, thank you very much for the defeat you're predicting there. Thank you, Dustin. Mikey, give us your thoughts and score prediction, because it looks tough for Tottenham. Arguably, we need wins to get ourselves up the table, but in reality, it looks like a tough game to win on paper.
No, it is. It's going to be an interesting one, because Man United Tottenham never fails to deliver. There's always some form of, obviously excluding the final in Bilbao. Cheers for that, by the way. There's also a sense of, the 4-3 with Sonny scoring the Olympico, the 1-0 when Maddison scored really, really early. There's always, and then Mickey's run in the 3-0. There's always something. So I'm expecting quite an end-to-end game, especially with Carrick's United. I see a lot of parallels between Amorim and Frank. It feels like a job too big for him. I think Frank is trying, almost turning Tottenham into Brentford. Frank seems like a guy who kind of reverts to what he's like a man who thrives in comfort. That's why he did so well at Brentford. He had everything accustomed to him, and he had a great relationship with Matthew Benham. It was a small working team. I live just down the road from Brentford, so I've watched their rise closely, and they've had quite isolated structures. And then he's come to Tottenham, where it's a much, much larger operation. He's kind of more of a head coach than a manager, to harken back to a famous Amorim quote. And now I think it is a job too big. I think he's signing players that he would have been able to get at Brentford. Us signing Conor Gallagher smells a little bit like Brentford signing Jordan Henderson, for example. It seems all a bit comfortable, and I think we need people who will push us forward. But on the game itself, I reckon we're looking at maybe the third 2-2 draw in a row. We'll go Burnley 2-2, Man City 2-2, and now Man United 2-2. I don't see us getting a win. If we do, it'd be great. Van der Ven is back, which is a plus for me, and it said Spence is touch and go. If he is, I think he'll be on the bench. Archie Gray at right wing back against Mateus Cunha, or I think Dorgu's out injured against Mateus Cunha or Ahmad Diallo or Mbema, whoever plays on the left-hand side.
Yeah, Dorgu's out for 10 weeks, so he won't be playing for a
Who
while.
plays on the left wing for you guys at the moment?
So we'll have Mateus Cunha will be playing there.
I'm not excited for that battle. I'm not excited to see Mateus Cunha take on Archie Gray. As much as I rate Gray, Mateus Cunha's got very tricky feet, and he's more of a midfielder than a wing back anyway. So I reckon it will be Romero, Van der Ven, and Palhinha at centre back, or Dragusin if we're in for a surprise. And I don't see the formation working against Carrick's intensity, and I think it'll be a 2-2 with. We've had a habit of a penchant for scoring big goals in big games, so maybe another Solanke goal or even a moment of magic from someone like Wilson Odobert. So we'll see what happens, but I'm predicting 2-2.
Okay, thank you, Mikey. Square pegs and round holes, it looks like, again, for Spurs. So disappointed we didn't address that in the window. I mean, I come to you, Rich. Before the game, you get onto I get your thoughts on score prediction. You also in the January window didn't do anything of significance. Do you think you would have if you didn't win those 3 games out of Carrick? Of course, you're glad and you wouldn't have it any other way that you have. But if the Glazers maybe changed, also said you Radcliffe got a bit maybe lazy. The fact that you won the 3 games and people put 2 and 2 together. Don't get me wrong, but I look at that and go, because we're winning games, you don't need to do anything. How do you view that?
I think Manchester United transfer policy causes a lot of anger with Manchester United fans, and I talk about it a lot and see a lot of anger about lack of signings. I think one of the issues we've got is that Manchester United's first 11 at the moment, I think, is very good. We know Casemiro is going to leave in the summer. He's not going to be extending his stay, and there's a good chance Maguire leaves. De Ligt's long-term sort of injury issue at the moment. I think our squad is fine for the rest of the season. But when you get players like Dorgu injured for 10 weeks, there's no replacement. There's literally no. He was a first-team player. There's no replacement, and I think our squad is a bit thin. So we have to avoid injuries. But the thing is, next season, based on what we're doing this season, we should get European football. Whether it's going to be Champions League, hopefully, or whether it's going to be Europa League, I don't see us dropping down out of those positions. And our squad will struggle to play 2 games a week, like high quality opposition. I think we've got very good first 11, but the bench will be largely academy players, so we don't have the depth. So it feels a bit naive to try and do all your deals in the summer, because we possibly look for a new head coach. We got a World Cup. We got lots of other teams want to strengthen. And I think one of the things that's frustrating is you got Gallagher. I'm not saying we were linked to Gallagher. We're linked to most players. But it just seems strange that we can't get a deal done, like 1 or 2 deals. They don't have to be £80 million players, but you see Man City gets Semenyo and Guehi, and we look at it and think, actually, we could do we could do with a new centre back. We could do with a new attacking left-sided player. But at the moment, inactivity, and I think fans are just frustrated with this, because it does seem that every single time we have a transfer window, say last summer, I don't want to go on too long with this, but last summer we didn't get a midfielder. Although at the very end of the window, with about a day to go, we tried to loan Gallagher. And it just seems like, come on, we know the transfer window when it's going to close. We know that if it's 1 or 2 days to go, you can't get certain deals done because they need to replace those players. And it just seems that we're too slow. And I don't know. I think we have a bit of incompetence, unfortunately, at the top of our club. Luckily, our head coach is actually on the ball, because otherwise we'd struggle, because they're not going to get a lot of support from the people above them.
Exactly that. Okay, thank you. Sounds similar situation then to Tottenham, indeed. I mean, look at that on paper as well, Rich. Thank you. And to end with you, Rich, can you give us your thoughts as a United fan in this game, and also your score prediction? Can you make it 4 in a row and you get closer to ending, the run, of course, of under Amorim, where you struggle against Tottenham?
Yeah, this would actually be the best run, wouldn't it? This would be a run that's never been accomplished by Amorim if we get 4 in a row. I'll have to say, if I can't be confident after winning against Arsenal and City, you never will be confident. I think I've got to be confident we should be able to score enough goals to get this game won. The question is going to be, we do have the odd defensive lapse, and we've won games, but we've won games 3-2. So I'm going to predict that both teams score at least a goal. I think we'll edge it though, but I'm thinking like a 2-1 or a 3-2. I think we've got enough firepower. And when I've watched you guys, sometimes your defense looks like it falls apart. And I think what we've played recently is we're a bit more compact, but we do concede chances, and some of the goals. I mean, against Arsenal, I guess Arsenal are a strong team anyway. And the second goal for Fulham, I think it's just one of those goals. It's just that sometimes that happens. You don't stop those. We haven't conceded loads of chances in games. Like Fulham didn't have a lot of chances. One was a penalty. One was a bit of a wonder goal. But we do create a lot of chances ourselves, and we do look quite clinical. So I'm going to say maybe like 2-1 or 3-1 United. I'm going to say I think we've got enough firepower, and until we start dropping points, I'm going to be quite optimistic. But again, it will be, if you haven't watched Manchester United recently, and you watched us when we played you recently, you might be in for a bit of a surprise because the team looks extremely different under Carrick. The intensity is like different level. But I'm looking forward to the game though, because they're usually like high-scoring matches between us.
Who's
If you
your
sh-
indeed?
If you shoot from distance, you don't have any worries.
Exactly
We
that.
used to have that with Binder. I just
The-
thought, just don't concede a shot because he's not going to save it.
The
Mm.
the guy from United Strand can start calling up his barber as long as you shoot from distance, because Frank doesn't think it's an issue. That's why we've conceded at least 10 this season.
Look at that. Yeah,
It's
blind
5-3. Is that this year?
Yes, this is
Yeah.
all this year.
Crazy, isn't it? Crazy stats there, but
goals.
that is fine. Yeah, exactly. There you go. But thank you very much, everyone. That wraps us up for this episode of the Scarfey Spurs podcast. And we'll go through the panel and see if you can find them on social media. Feel free to jump once we plug your socials. Ian, I'll start with you. Thank you so much for your time. Please tell people they can follow you individually, and also if they want to listen to the Spurs Diehards YouTube channel. Thank you again for your time.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, you can find me on Twitter at Shaggy1712. On Diehards, the show I host is on a Sunday night. We also go out on Tuesdays, unless there's a game on a Tuesday night, and a Friday. So please keep in touch with us. But if you want to find me on Twitter at Shaggy1712, I always follow back my fellow Spurs supporters.
Great stuff, Ian. Thank you very much for your time, as always. Thank you. Dustin, thank you so much for joining us. What will it be now? 4:14 a.m. in Singapore. So really appreciate your commitment, as I say many times, to this football club, to myself and also to this podcast. Honestly, greatly appreciated. Where can people follow you on the socials? What have you got up and coming as well?
Yep, so you can follow me on X or Twitter with this handle over here, Luminoir. And I've also got a YouTube video series where I do tactical breakdowns. A lot of the slides from today are from my latest video, where I'm going to do kind of data in football, how we can use it to analyze our season. Also, trying to decode what Frank is talking about when we go to a press conference and he says that was a good performance. And what underlying data is he referring to when he says we did well in this? And a bit of it is also diagnosing what data he's referring to when he says we did well, and then what is he conveniently leaving out when he tries to spin that narrative.
Great stuff. That sounds good. Thank you very much, Dustin. Great stuff as always. Mikey, thank you very much for your time. Great to have you on twice in a week. It's a real privilege for myself, and great to hear your thoughts and opinions. Where can people follow you on the socials?
So I'm mainly active on my Instagram. It's just at my first name, last name, Mikey Kulo, and you can find me at that handle on Twitter as well. But I'm less active on Twitter. I probably need to be a bit more active on there, to be honest. But yeah, my Instagram is where I'm most active, and you can in my Instagram bio, there's a link to my creative writing and to my football blog as well.
Great stuff. Keep up the good work. Thank you, Mikey. And Rich, thank you so much for your time. For any Spurs fans, United fans, football fans listening, they should be interested in your content. You do some great content, if I may say so. Where can they find it and also follow you?
So yeah, mostly Red Devil United, the YouTube channel, and then there's links to Twitter. I'm not as active on Twitter because I know there's a lot of nonsense on Twitter, but and Instagram. But usually with my YouTube channel is where you can find me. But there's links if you're on that. There's links to other things as well. There's a Discord as well. But all fans are welcome. Okay, I'm a biased Manchester United fan, but all fans are welcome because we do talk about other teams as well. And I think a lot of transfers and stories overlap between clubs as well. And also, it seems terrible owners seems to be a common theme among a lot of fans as well. And probably, I was going to say, we're linked with building a new stadium. I guess you guys have got a new stadium, so you're well aware of ticket price hikes and all these sort of things. But United are protesting about a lot of things, which I think affect every club. Every club's got similar sort of problems. And I think Manchester United fans are just probably more vocal because there's a lot of them, so they can get together and try and organise things. But thanks for the invite, Harry. I know we've tried to do this a bit in the past, and sometimes it's difficult finding the time. But it's also nice to meet other Spurs fans. It seems like hopefully it's not going to be like another Spurs win, because I've seen enough of those, unfortunately.
If it is, you're coming back on. That's for sure. Let's talk about it. But no, all jokes aside, thank you for your time. You're right about X. Honestly, some people are absolutely insane. Let me tell you that. I was told the other day that I'd never been a Spurs game to my life. I was told that on 3 separate occasions, and I've been season ticket holder since I was 9. And this guy would not accept it. People are like that. Yeah, they can just ignore, tell you you're not real, and things like that.
They're not people. They're not people, Harry. They're bots.
They've got to be bots, haven't they? Or they've got something wrong in their head. Do you know, I think there's other people that do have something wrong in their head. That's for sure. Maybe throw a book at them, they might be all right. But no, thank you to everyone who's come on the podcast and all these guests here, and as well as all the viewers. Always speak a lot of sense, and there are sensible people still left in the footballing world, I promise, and they're all on the podcast tonight. Please follow them though. In all seriousness, I have some fantastic guests on regularly, and thank you to everyone that's listened, that's watched, that's supported. Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your day. And a massive come on, you Spurs.